30-minute ad is wild. Is there psyops in this 30-minute ad? Are you inserting something into my brain while I'm watching it? Why does it need to be 36 minutes?
Hey there, challengers. Get ready to crank it up because the energy's going off the roof. We've got the challenge workout brought to you by the unstoppable U.S. Air Force Special Warfare. We're talking the 1% of the 1% most specialized operatives on the planet. A job for the mentally tough and physically strong. These elite heroes go where others.
Having friends in high places is a cheat code to becoming successful in any industry, but sometimes it feels like it's the only way to become successful in the entertainment industry. This has become more apparent in the stand-up comedy / podcast industry within the past few years. The Joe Rogan effect, or the Brogan effect, is essentially that any comedian who is friends with, or regularly featured on the Joe Rogan Experience, would have a significant advantage to becoming a wildly successful comedian or podcaster. Some of these comedians are hilarious, and others are clearly not cut from the same cloth. Even Cat Williams has been critical of the Rogan sphere.
That would be like me being on Joe Rogan. Joe don't want me on there. I need to be on Shannon. Joe got 6 comedians that never been funny. He won't push out.
Today we are going to analyze Joe Rogan's impact on the comedy industry and the comics who strategically aligned themselves with Rogan to advance their careers, starting with Brendan Schaub, who Joe convinced to become a comedian only to regret that decision a few years later. In December of 2014, Joe was sitting across the table from UFC heavyweight Brendan Schaub, who was just coming off his second loss in a row, this time by knockout. Joe spent 20 to 30 minutes dissecting Brendan's fighting skill and capabilities, and then blatantly stated that he is not good enough to fight in the UFC.
The reality of your skill set, where you at now, I don't see you beating the elite guys. It's not that you don't try.
Yo, you know what would have been the coolest, compilation ever? If Brendan Schaub stayed in the UFC, became the heavyweight champion, or whatever he was, the champion of whatever division he is, and then, boom, he plays this segment. He plays this exact segment in the podcast, right? Plays that, and then it's like, it's maybe Drake by Family. It's like, and then he says a word that I can't say, and then boom, and then it goes into the fighting. What do you think about that?
Try hard. It's not that you're not dedicated. It's not that you're not disciplined. It's not that you're not intelligent. There's shit that other people can do that you can't do.
Now, Joe was just trying to be honest. He was trying to be a good friend. Their other friend, Brian Callen, who is a stand-up comedian, chimed into the conversation to suggest Schaub had a comedy career in front of him.
What I care about is the fact that you have a future in other things and you're really good at. Like, you're really funny.
Dude, you know how many pictures that I've gotten sent to me that say, "Don't put me in a sauna, make me my way out"?
I know.
He say funny shit,
Dude.
Now, when you have 2 professional comedians telling you that you are funny, and you already host a successful sports / comedy show, it's obvious that pursuing a comedy career is better than continuing to get knocked out in the UFC. So Brendan officially retired from MMA and began podcasting full time. Schaub has been featured on the Joe Rogan Experience 90 times, which is more than any other guest in history. His exposure to the massive JRE fanbase allowed him to bypass the 10-year grind through small clubs and dive bars that all comedians have to do to build their name in the industry. In less than 1 year, Brendan was doing solo stand-up tours, and his shows were in front of fairly large crowds considering he had not proved himself as a funny comedian. He started another podcast called The King and the Sting alongside Theo Vaughn. By the end of 2018, Brendan owned and produced 3 very successful podcasts, was traveling around the country selling out comedy shows while being aligned with some of the biggest comics in the business after just 2 years in. He then released his first stand-up special on Showtime called You'd Be Surprised. Now, releasing a special is a huge moment in a comedian's career, as it stamps a permanent piece of their art that was carefully crafted over years of hard work. Most legendary comics waited 8 to 10 years before they were good enough to release their first special. With an average rating of 1.4 out of 10 stars, it's safe to say that comedy fans decided that Brendan was not ready. And while I'm not going to sit here and pick apart his entire special, his first joke about getting a haircut definitely speaks volumes about what he thinks is a good punchline.
You go, but don't sweat it, bro. We got Jamal here. He's very good. Just sit in the chair, he'll be right with you. So I sit in the chair, I'm thinking to myself, all right, clearly Jamal's a black dude. This dude comes out of the bathroom, he's all, "What's up, man? I'm Jamal." He was Asian as shit.
Thank you for the ad. I
Climate
thank you.
change.
Thank you.
It's
Sometimes
easy
I get
to
a
feel
little,
overwhelmed.
I get a little upset about the ads, you know, here and now and then again. I don't do it a whole lot. Right, guys? I needed that one, though.
Feel way better about this if I needed help with math or some shit, you know? I was just like...
The joke is 2 minutes long, but the whole story was about how he got a bad haircut by an Asian barber named Jamal.
And he
He
thought he
also
was
made fun of an
black,
Asian
too.
doctor who was servicing his injury after his loss to Travis Brown.
This giant Asian doctor walks up to me and goes, "Mr. Shab, I'm sorry for your loss." He takes out the biggest syringe you've ever seen in your life, like he's out of a goddamn comic book. Goes, "Mr. Shab, I have to numb your lip. You need many, many stitches. This be worst pain in your life, guaranteed. Worst pain in your life."
As if the joke wasn't bad enough, this is the actual voice of the doctor he was mimicking.
I take care of all the fighters as well as employees within the UFC family.
Even Rogan said years later that Schaub's special was a mistake.
The first one, I would have probably tried to talk you out of it, but I already talked you out of fighting.
Yeah.
And I was like, I can't talk him out of this, too.
Joe now admits that Brendan was not funny enough to release a special, but continuously allows him to promote his comedy to the millions of JRE viewers. They both convinced the JRE community that Brendan's second comedy special, Gringo Poppy, was going to be much better, and somehow Brendan outdid his last performance, going from 1.4 stars to 1.1 out of 10 stars. Rogan continuing to amplify Schaub just pissed off the fandom. This guy is my hero. Average fighter, average podcaster, terrible comedian, awful fight analysis. He's proven you don't have to be great at anything to be successful. Now, I'm not blaming Joe for the mass hatred towards Schaub. He definitely did that to himself. If anything, this just proves that Joe is a good friend, willing to continuously promote his buddy despite the obvious lack of comedic talent. Which begs the question that people have been asking for years. Does Joe Rogan understand comedy? Because there have been countless examples of jokes sliding right over his smooth, round head. But first, a quick word from today's sponsor, Underdog Fantasy. Underdog is the easiest way to play fantasy sports. Not just basketball, you can make picks on baseball, football, hockey, UFC, and more. Just pick whether you think your favorite player's stats will be higher or
It's
lower, and you
almost
can make
funnier.
big money. You can make your own entry with
It's
as few as
almost
2
funnier
picks and 3x
when
your
someone
money, or go
doesn't
bigger to win up
understand
to
the joke.
100x. New
know
customers
what I
can
mean?
pair that with Nikola
like,
Jokic
it's so
to go
funny.
higher than 1 point. All he has to do is have at least 1 point to win that selection. Here are my picks for
It's
this week's
funny
NBA
when someone
games,
tells a
and if
good
it
joke
hits, I'll
and
6x
someone just
my money.
keeps on
I've got
going.
a special
That's-
promo. Underdog is offering new users a
That's very
$100
funny.
deposit match. That's right, $100. Underdog's pick'em games are available in 30 plus states, including California, Texas, and even Canada. They also just launched Champions, their player versus player
That's
game
funny.
in Florida. All you have to do is click the link below or download Underdog via the App Store and use code PatrickCC. That's Underdog Fantasy, promo code PatrickCC for a first deposit match worth up to $100. It makes watching the NBA even more interesting for me. So rep your team and make your own picks with Underdog.
Dolphins commit infanticide. They kill babies.
They do it on purpose.
Yeah. Well, they killed their own.
Mulder was so smart and thoughtful. He wrote my 4 best movies. That's why he died. I made Tusk and Yoga Hosers. Like, without that dog writing for me.
How'd he write for you?
It's a joke, Joe. He was feral. he was just saying he was so smart.
Oh.
He was so smart. How smart was he? He's so smart he wrote my last few scripts. Joke didn't quite land. Sorry,
I was missing
folks.
something.
was
I wasn't
my
paying
bad.
attention.
Since Joe Rogan has been a comedian for 36 years and is the highest ranking comedy tastemaker, you would assume that no joke would ever have to be explained to him.
That all came from a pair of rich, noble. Where were they again? In France?
Wiggers, I
In
think
France.
they called them.
No, Wiggers are white people. that wish they were black. It's a totally different thing.
Yeah. Yeah. We had the first one at our school growing up, and they put them in learning disabled classes.
The
How
first
crazy
one
is that?
ever?
Yeah.
You guys are the first one ever? I doubt it.
Joe being so quick to explain or take a comedian's words so literally is arguably more hilarious than if he just laughed. And to be fair, what makes Theo Von so funny is that you never really know if what he's saying is true or not.
But you could also not see your body if you want. Like, I'll go sometimes, I remember one time I went like 8 months without seeing my legs.
Theo's first appearance on the Joe Rogan Experience was in March of 2017. By then, he already had a Netflix special that came out 1 full year earlier. Now, getting a Netflix comedy special is huge today, and it definitely still was in 2016, but you have to consider Netflix had 75% less subscribers back then, so way less people had the potential to see it. It wasn't until Theo started making appearances on podcasts that he developed such a die-hard fan base, so getting on Joe Rogan was arguably more important than Netflix. And it was on this very first appearance where Theo's ridiculousness and Joe's killing the joke dynamic was established.
Like if a plane crashed, I already know I'm planning ahead, dude. I'd eat a Vietnamese guy.
Why?
Because that's easy. It's a starter move. If you attack somebody bigger, if you eat somebody bigger in front of other people, it's going to alarm people.
You got to eat a small person, so stature is important.
I think if you gum down a Viet, people aren't going to be that upset at you.
Well, the Vietnamese people are going to be super upset. What are you talking about?
No,
Somebody's
okay.
dad.
Yeah, they're more understanding of things, dude.
Joe begins to take Theo seriously and starts talking about why Theo's wrong here. But Theo is a master and is able to use Joe's own boring tangent as the punchline.
But what is interesting is like Vietnam is one of the few places where Americans can go back to Vietnam and they don't seem to hold any grudge at all.
Exhibit A. Exhibit A, man, honestly.
Theo told another story about being neighbors with and working out with David Duke, who was a KKK member elected as a Louisiana state representative. Instead of hearing Theo's insane story, Joe just began searching Wikipedia to learn about David instead.
He touted himself as a pro-life fiscal conservative, was known as an ex-Klan member. He eschewed overtly racist language and instead pointed to crime in the city, criticizing affirmative action and minority set-asides.
Yeah, I just did chest and tries with him, so I wasn't in all that. You know, we just did basic workouts.
Title this, Joe interrupts another guest story to try and remember something that doesn't even contribute to the conversation. Despite this, Theo did make Joe laugh a lot. Some argue that the only time Joe ever belly laughs is because of Theo.
Oh, dude, I used to do, sometimes I would do so much cocaine, my freaking eyes would dry out.
Ooh,
and
look at you grinding. You're thinking about it, grinding. You go deep, huh?
Oh, dude.
But you're that dude. You go deep with whatever the fuck you're doing.
I like to get right on the I like to be a peeping Tom if I can. I'll watch your whole family eat dinner.
The demand for Theo Von content exploded. The JRE Clips channel would post animated versions of Theo and Joe's conversations that received millions of views, since Theo's recollection of small specific details made it so easy to paint a picture. Every time Theo would appear on JRE, he received a huge boost in subscribers, helping him grow his own This Past Weekend podcast. On his third Rogan appearance on July 6, 2018, he posted his podcast with Jordan Peterson the exact same day, which became his most viewed video on his channel for years. Despite the obvious advantage Theo had by being Joe's friend, he did not abuse it. He's only been a guest on the podcast 7 times in 8 years. Theo clearly wanted to build a name for himself, start his own empire, and create an environment where people would understand him and his humor instead of Joe missing 50% of his jokes. And at this point, the awkward silence where Joe either ignores a joke or doesn't understand it, and then the comedian is trying to figure out how to pivot, is funnier than if the joke just actually landed.
Everyone has the right to be whatever the f they are.
Oh, you think?
I think so.
What about Nazis?
They have the more of a right. A third right.
I don't think that's right. I think it's something. That's a different word. It's
Reich?
Yeah. What does that even mean? What is Third Reich?
I don't know.
I don't even literally don't. I mean, I know what the Third Reich is, but I don't even know what it means. Take a guess.
Isn't that talking about
I
resurrection?
literally have no idea what that means.
You could argue that Joe's podcast is so multifaceted, covering a wide range of topics such as news, pop culture, UFC, cold plunging, alien conspiracies, DMT, chimpanzees, that it's difficult for him to immediately assess a joke when he is discussing something serious. Then again, why wouldn't you expect a comedian to crack jokes no matter what you're talking about? That's their job. Or maybe Joe is playing the straight man role, which is the partner in a comedy team who feeds lines to the other comedian who then makes witty replies. One person we can guarantee he is not playing this role to is Bryan Callen. Joe and Bryan have been friends for decades, and Bryan has co-hosted the podcast 85 times. You would think Joe would understand that Bryan pretending to be a tough guy is a funny gimmick since he is a small old man.
I got bullied for a full year, and it turned me into a if somebody tried to bully me, I'll show up at your house and kill you. That's what happens. I get so angry.
I'm not buying that even remotely.
I hate when
Hey,
it's
bro,
not true.
You bully me.
If I
you know
bully
you
you,
try bullying me right now, mother. Hold on, let me handle this.
Here's your problem. You talk to too many guys that let you say shit like that, and then it becomes like vernacular.
And in case you're wondering, this is how you're supposed to riff with Brian when he starts running his mouth.
I'm gonna tell you this right now.
Yeah.
Watch your tone.
Okay.
Oh, buddy.
What's gonna happen?
Oh, buddy.
What are you gonna do? Use some of that boxing you've been doing?
Don't you disrespect.
But since Joe has been a diehard UFC fan and employee since day one, he is not even remotely interested in joking about it.
Should they do something like that in UFC where different people that are more behind the scenes fight each other?
No.
So, you versus Bruce Buffer.
No.
Would you watch that?
No, you want to watch people fight that are actual fighters.
So when Brian turns on this tough guy act, Joe is convinced he's being serious because he hangs around fighters and hits the gym occasionally. Then again, you could argue that Joe is just genuinely sick of Brian and has been listening to his bullshit for years. Like on episode 2017 when Brian was joking about Schaub returning to the UFC to fight Derek Lewis.
He was throwing Derek Lewis out there with no gloves.
Good Lord.
But wait, hold on. Just hear me out.
Do you want to die?
Sir, hear me out.
What?
I'm just talking about just shoot a blast double.
Shut
Take the ground, and then we got that.
The fuck up. Shut the fuck up.
And despite being on Rogan's podcast 85 times, Brian Callen has yet to prove to the audience that he is funny. Callen has released...
I think he's joking there. Like, there's an argument to be made that that's joking.
Just hear me out.
Do you want to die?
You know,
Sir, hear me out.
What?
I'm just talking about
I mean,
shoot a blast double.
Sip of the cup.
Take the ground, and then we got that.
The fuck up. Shut the fuck up.
And despite being on Rogan's podcast 85 times, Brian Callen has yet to prove to the audience that he is funny. Callen has released 4 specials over the past 12 years and none of them were purchased by a major streaming network. All of them were released for free online and the most popular one has not even reached 1 million views. Callen's comedy is just okay. It's solid. It's decent, which some would argue is worse than being bad. Being so middle of the road that you can't say anything positive or negative. It just exists. Luckily, Brian has Joe so he can maintain his career and finances. Recently on the podcast, he tried to divert the conversation to get Joe to promote his newest business venture, Toehold, a luxury flip-flop brand that sells pairs for $1,000 and features really sick designs like Bad Motherfucker.
I don't give a fuck what it says. If that's not... Listen. If it's not... This is what it needs to be for me to buy something $400. It needs to be safe for me so I can walk around on fucking nails and just be fine, right? I need a cancer-free guarantee. I need to guarantee that where I'm wearing this type of product is never going to have any kind of cancer formation going on with it, right? Also, they look like shit. It looks like a shit brand. Who would pay $400 or $500 for something like that?
And we the people. Sick.
Hey, put your toes on.
Say.
Take those off.
Shut the fuck up. Listen to him. Listen to him.
Come
So
on.
silly.
Well,
I know
the
you
three
want
of
to promote your goofy
I'm
flip
not promoting him. I just got
You don't even call them toe holds.
Feel him under your
Put your
feet.
toe holds on.
Feel him for you. Feel him under your feet. Come on.
You gotta love Brian panicking when he realizes that Joe making fun of his sandals is not gonna boost sales. But no worries, they put a quote of Joe on the website saying they are the best flip-flops he ever had. And this is not the first time a comedian came on the show to promote their product that Joe hated. Steve-O came on the pod with a bag full of stuff that he was selling, which Joe was not enthusiastic about, only to...
I seen this. I'm not gonna lie. I couldn't tell if it was a joke or not either. But I assume if someone's coming in with a grocery bag full of shit that they're like, oh yeah, I got this, selling this, promo for that. Also got a promo for this, use code SteveO. I got a promo for that. That one is Steve. The O is before the Steve. Oh, Steve. I got this one just Steve on that one. Promo for that. That's fucking ridiculous.
to completely destroy Steve-O's newest business venture.
Hey, let me tell you about what I'm selling for cheddar.
You got a bag of stuff you're selling?
Steve-O's butt wipes for your butthole.
Well, that's where generally you'd use a butt wipe.
Yeah, flushable butt
You
wipes.
wouldn't use it for your
dude.
cheeks. They're flushable?
Right.
Not really.
They're not.
Let me tell you
flushable.
something
They're
about
gonna
those
fuck up
flushable
the
butt
toilet.
wipes.
That's
Don't
what I've
flush
been
'em.
saying.
Oh yeah.
That's what I've been
they all
saying.
talk to a plumber. Those things all clog up. They don't break down. They
Oh,
get
shit.
stuck in pipes.
I
Yeah.
pi- I picked the wrong place to.
Google are butt wipes
That's right, buddy.
flushable? Flushable butt wipes. Are they flushable? They're not. They tell you don't flush them. You're flushing a rag down the toilet. You're not even supposed to flush paper towels. Paper towels
Not
break
even
down in your
toilet
hand when you
paper.
get them wet. Those things don't break down. Don't sell those.
Joe quite literally said the words, "Don't sell those." As Steve-O stuttered and tried to figure out what to say, Joe proceeded to spend the next 5 minutes proving his argument how flushable wipes will lead to catastrophic plumbing issues that will cost thousands of dollars to repair, and will harm the safety of the public water supply. Joe decimated the product, and Steve-O thought he was going to get a quick plug, which again is a testament of Joe's character. He might be your buddy, but he's not just going to blindly co-sign whatever product you're promoting. However, this is nothing compared to Shane Gillis, who straight up said to Joe's face he was using him for publicity. In 2019, Shane Gillis was a buzzing comedian recognized by the industry for being a rising star. He secured the coveted position as a writer for Saturday Night Live. Having SNL on your resume is strong enough to build an entire career off of. However, Shane was fired just 5 days later, making it the shortest tenure in SNL history. He was fired for making a racist joke on his podcast where he used the CH slur to describe Chinese people in a joke. 2 years after he was fired, Shane went on Rogan's podcast to tell the story. Shane was detailing the events that led to his termination and tried to make a joke about the conversation he had with Lorne Michaels, the SNL producer who was about to fire him.
If I get fired here, whatever, I'll just go do Joe Rogan next week and I'll be fine. Anyway, I thought that was funny. No?
What?
I was like, I literally...
Is that what you thought?
I literally thought that.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I thought it would be funny.
Well, it could have been funny.
Yeah.
I was booked up, though.
No, it's fine. It was just funny to truly... That was a conversation I actually had.
Really?
In Lorne Michaels' office in the middle of that.
That's hilarious.
I was in pure fucking... panic.
Terror?
Yeah. Yeah.
Not only is this awkward moment absolute gold, it also was the first time anyone had ever blatantly said to Joe's face they will use him to advance their career. Now, Shane was joking. The whole joke was that this was a stupid, arrogant thought. At the same time, was it? I mean, you could easily argue that a comedian cracking jokes on Joe Rogan's podcast will get you more career advancement than Saturday Night Live will. When JRE was exclusive to Spotify, it averaged 11 million viewers per episode. Now that it's available on YouTube, I'm sure those numbers have gone up. Not to mention all of the channels that clip his podcast and cross-post across all social medias. Saturday Night Live's season premieres in the past few years have averaged around 4 or 5 million, and that's just the first episode. When's the last time you saw an SNL sketch show up on your For You page? As far as creating an independent comedy career, doing stand-up shows around the country, and boosting your social media followers, Joe Rogan's podcast will help comedians far more than Saturday Night Live. Also, if Shane didn't go on Rogan's podcast to tell this story about him being fired, most people probably wouldn't even know about it. Less than 2 months after his first JRE episode, Shane recorded his first special and posted it for free on YouTube. This 1-hour set was simply his best jokes in front of a tiny crowd in Austin, Texas, far from the glamorous, high-produced theater performances you typically see. And this was easily the funniest comedy special to come out in the past few years. With 26 million views on YouTube and an average 8.4 out of 10 stars, comedy fans love Shane Gillis. And Rogan also loves Shane Gillis. Shane just has to hit him with simple premises like gay jokes for Joe to burst into tears.
Armpit hair doesn't bother me at all.
No.
Doesn't
On
bother
a lady?
me.
So
No.
wait, you like
Close.
jack ladies with armpit hair?
Yeah, a little bit of
You're
armpit
getting
hair.
close. You're so close. That's as close as it gets. Yeah, I like a good buzz cut.
In fact, Joe thought Shane was so funny that they started a podcast within the JRE podcast called Protect Our Parks. Rogan, Gillis, Ari Shaffir, and Mark Norman have done a 3 to 4 hour podcast roughly once per month for the past 2 years. Within those 2 years, Netflix bought Shane's second special, Beautiful Dogs. With Netflix comedy being more relevant than ever, this was a huge opportunity for Shane. Since his first special was posted on his own YouTube page, you could argue that maybe he got some biased favoritism. However, Netflix would expose him to a much more broad, unbiased audience, and he seemingly won them over as well, securing a 7.9 out of 10 star rating. Shane Gillis is definitely one of the funniest comedians to come out of the Rogan sphere. He is an example of a comedian who would have gotten to this level of fame and recognition regardless, but being friends with Joe Rogan helped speed up that process a little bit. But besides Shane Gillis and Theo Von, the JRE community is sick and tired of the rest of Joe's core group. Ari Shaffir, Bert Kreischer, and even Tom Segura are not celebrated like they used to be.
Who said that? Who said that? Ari Shaffir? I think that guy's funny. Tom Segura? I think he's a fucking psychopath. Bert? He's an alcoholic. This is the perfect trio to have. This is like the... I mean, come on.
In 2010, Joe invited Ari on the 3rd ever episode of the Joe Rogan Experience podcast. Ari was in 9 of the first 100 episodes and has been a guest over 60 times, making him the 4th most frequent guest of all time. It's safe to say he is a day one JRE community member, yet he isn't exactly the most beloved. Ari is not necessarily disliked for his humor, as he is most definitely a seasoned comedian who will make you laugh. But on multiple occasions, his jokes come off as mean-spirited and hateful. For example, 4 hours after the reports of the death of Kobe Bryant and his daughter Gianna, Ari posted a tweet celebrating his death, and then after catching a huge wave of criticism from this tweet, he shortly doubled down with a video.
As I know, there's always a lot of hate, pain in the world, and there's always a bunch of terrible stories. And every once in a while, there's a good story. A good story comes out. The guy who got away with it got his today. Kobe Bryant is gone. I'm here in Charlotte, the home of the team that originally drafted him.
That's wild. That's wild.
Maybe he wouldn't have that chick in Denver if he had stayed in Charlotte with the Hornets. But anyway, the point is, dude, it's like
Rogan tried to.
I mean, part of it is making people upset. Is showing people what upsets them. And bringing it into this kind of oh, it doesn't matter type of thing, right? Like that's like the gist of it all. It's like, oh, this really matters? No, it doesn't. Let me,
explain to his viewers that this is just a part of who Ari is.
No, I never want to say it's a good thing that he did that, but he needed to know that there are consequences for just saying ridiculous shit that you're not supposed to say when people die.
And like the good friend that Rogan is, he even went as far as taking partial responsibility for another grown man's actions to try and take some of the heat off Ari's back.
One part of me feels responsible. This is why. I convinced him that he could have an iPhone and that he could be okay. Just put a timer on it. I go, just put a timer on it. I go, my daughter has a timer on her phone. She can only use it for an hour a day. Just put a timer on your phone. And he should have stuck with a fucking flip phone, man.
Then again, Rogan simply laughed off Ari's behavior when he decided to spike Bert Kreischer's drink with Molly. One night, Bert invited his friend and fellow comedian Ari Shaffir over to his house to do a podcast. Ari shook Bert's 13 and 15-year-old daughter's hands, walked into the podcast room where they were going to share some drinks. Then Ari decided to secretly slip a capsule of MDMA, aka Molly, into Bert's drink without him knowing. Bert went into a full-blown panic, and it didn't make it any easier that he had to get on a flight early the next morning. But Joe Rogan thought the situation was hilarious.
Because he spiked Bert. He gave his friend Molly. That's not okay.
It's not okay.
But wait, that's hilarious though. It's still hilarious.
I don't believe your fake anger.
That's a real weird one.
There's no fake anger.
It sounds like Nikki was kind of making it okay, and then Joe went along with it. Like, again, that's the fucking, that's the thing.
Here's
that's
what I
the
did
fucking
was,
thing,
I'm
man.
on your side with this, Ari.
Thank you. I
But
appreciate
don't
it. I appreciate it. End of story. Thank you.
he said he's not on your side.
That's not what I heard.
No matter if you're right or wrong, you can always count on Joe to be there for you. The reason he defended Ari so hard is probably because he knows he needs to give Bert Kreischer a reality check, because Bert has let the Brogan fame spiral his life out of control. After Bert released his 2009 comedy special, Comfortably Dumb, he secured his own reality show on the Travel Channel called Bert the Conqueror. Despite the show being being the biggest thing going for him, Joe Rogan and Bill Burr sat down with Burt to tell him some harsh truths. Burt said, "They sat me down and told me, your Travel Channel show sucks. You're funnier than that. You need to do specials. You need to do podcasts." Burr remembers the conversation vividly. He was down in the dumps trying to figure out what the next move was, and Joe Rogan and I were just starting podcasting. Joe is 100% the reason why Burt quit TV and began pursuing comedy and podcasting more seriously. But he did more than that. He invited Burt to be a regular on JRE from the very beginning. Burt has been a guest 37 times. In the beginning, the JRE community treated him like their funny fat friend who has some of the most ridiculous stories. He became wildly successful, securing multiple Netflix specials, his own reality TV show called The Cabin with Burt. The 2021/2022 Birdie Boy Tour was ranked number 4 in the top 10 highest grossing tours of the year, achieving a gross revenue of $23 million, selling 369,000 tickets over the course of 148 shows, and he even released his own feature film about his life that was in theaters. But the more successful he became, the more self-centered he became, once even referring to fans as pedestrians.
It's so funny. A comic's brain is so different than a pedestrian's brain.
But it just got worse. His alcohol addiction got out of control, his health was severely deteriorating, he became more obnoxious, constantly interrupting people, constantly wanting to be the center of attention. It got so bad where Joe just needed to humble him.
Both Tom and Christina are
Hold
very
on.
nice
I'm
people,
gonna be
and they'll
devil's
be
advocate.
very.
I'm gonna be devil's advocate.
Shut the f up for a second.
And how about the time Burt tried to convince himself that Netflix photoshopped a different man's stomach on his body for the flyer of his Secret Time special?
Explain.
My belly has fallen over like everyone else's. When I did Secret Time, I didn't realize that it already happened until they did the billboard of it. And they did the billboard, and I go, "That's not my stomach. My stomach's tight." And it was complete.
The craziest, most delusional perspective.
Realizing they're not going to budge, Burt tries to get Joe to compliment his shoulders.
Thought your belly was smaller than that.
I thought I was in great shape. And they put that up on Melrose, and I saw it. I drove past it, and I go,
He really does like to talk about his shoulders a lot. You know, you're like, man, I got some big shoulders, though. I am pushing 300 pounds. Yeah, you're right. Yeah, maybe. Yeah, maybe I eat mac and cheese every day. Maybe I have a bottle or two every night of some wine. Can a man not have some fun? Look at how big my shoulders are. See how big my shoulders are naturally? You see how big they are? God, they're huge. My God, they're huge.
"Go, oh, they must have put someone
He
else's
does
belly
do
on
that
me or
a lot.
photoshopped it."
Yeah, like
And
this
then
is like when you go like, I have legit the best shoulders.
I do. Hold on, I do. I have legit great shoulders, like great fucking shoulders. Yeah.
No, you don't.
Joe, they're ripping through this shirt right now.
Yeah, but you say
No, you
things
just
you
bought
don't
a
really
boy
mean
shirt.
it, right? Like
No, I
when you
kinda mean
say
it. I
things
kinda
you
mean
know
it.
they're
I
not
told you.
true.
Whether you think he deserves it or not, Joe Rogan has become the biggest comedy tastemaker in the world. I didn't even mention how he moved to Austin, Texas, opened his own comedy club, and created vast new opportunities for comics to maintain their careers. Most comedians don't rely on Joe's podcast for their relevance, but going on there and cracking some jokes isn't all that different than the 90s version of doing a 5-minute set on late night television. The only difference is there's no live crowd, and all you gotta do is make one bald conspiracy theorist who barely understands when you are joking laugh a little bit. And yeah, sure, maybe Joe has given some of his buddies an unfair advantage. The good news is you don't have to listen to them, nor do you have to buy tickets to their stand-up or watch their specials. But one thing you can't say about Joe is that he's not a great friend.
I value loyalty a lot. And I remember there was a moment when I was sitting with Joe and he had a phone call with you. Joe was getting canceled for something. They didn't want him commentating the fights. And you on the phone offered your resignation over this. I got teary-eyed over that.
Joe Rogan has been very loyal to me, and I am very loyal to Joe Rogan.
Hell yeah.